All right, let's talk some ball. We got a Wednesday. It'll be interesting to see what Doug Peterson says today, if anything, any kind of reaction. Just to put a bow on all the stuff of yesterday, last couple of days, where honestly, I didn't even see a lot of sometimes other folks in town, other shows, other times of day, other media members, other from articles. I didn't catch a lot, and that's probably on me. I don't even know if the yesterday show topic was really a topic around Jacksonville the last couple of days as much as we made it a topic. And I don't
Yeah.
think we were wrong to make it a topic, Austin. Like, I think it's a big, like, I think it was a big deal coming off Monday, what Doug said. What I don't know, and the reason I bring it up like that, is because if we're like the only ones to make it a bit of a topic and dwell on it or whatever else, then did it even infiltrate the locker room, right? Was it something that everybody
Okay.
had their
Well,
ears on and people are looking at? And so I wonder if it's going to be a topic today at all when they get back in the building, something internally they even address, or just something that's kind of buzzing as an underbelly, or something that even the media will even try to, poke questions about today.
yeah. I mean, I think it was a topic, Brent, because I saw a lot of quality, and not to get too political, but I saw a lot of quality, Harris, Trump
I did see
debate
that.
memes that to turn into Doug Peterson, Trevor Lawrence memes last night. I saw a bunch of them, and that really made my night last night. So yeah, I think it definitely is a talking point. Now, whether or not it's a big deal in the locker room, like I said, I think players these days more than ever have their eyes and ears to the ground of what's going on in social media. I mean, we talked about on Monday Christian Kirk, and we didn't really talk about it, but Christian Kirk said something regarding Parker Washington. Where a fan said, replace Christian Kirk with Parker Washington. Christian Kirk comes out and says, keep that same energy. And I think he ends up deleting that tweet. Players are super self-aware, and I'm not saying it's the best thing, because I think it's a lot of energy that gets, wasted, that you don't have to worry about, because in the end of the day, a lot of social media, Brent, it's not even real. But I think when you have your head coach come out and say those comments, about the defense and be coached up a little more, yeah, like the last thing you want to create is a civil war between the offense and defense in a locker room. And generally, you know, it doesn't happen all the time, but generally, you're going to either have your offense be, your identity, or your defense. I mean, there's a couple of teams out there that play good offense and defense, right? And sometimes the other's got to pick, the other one up. But I think when you talk about week one, where you're still trying to learn everybody and you're still trying to get acclimated to what you have as a team, to start things off week one with that, it just wasn't necessary. This would have been one thing if we're talking about playing Baltimore last year, when Baltimore kind of ran the ball a little bit and we're like, okay, wow, I mean, it has to be coached up better. Or we talk about Tennessee, the last game of the season, couldn't stop Derrick Henry, couldn't stop Tajay Spears. Okay, that has to be coached up better. We have to do a better job going forward. I get all that. After the first game where you hold one of the most explosive offenses to 20 points, I just didn't think it was warranted. So I'm very curious to see, when does Ryan Nielsen, Brent, get in front of the media?
He goes on Thursday. So that's the other part of this, right? I
Okay.
mean, that's something that could linger till Thursday if it is a big deal and if it is a lingering type of topic. And what I mean by this, and I don't want to assume everybody kind of gets what I'm saying here, but it's a little bit like the play calling, right? It's like the play calling has been a 6-7 month topic, and you can tell internally Doug doesn't feel like this is that big a topic. And with all due respect to everybody here in Jacksonville and from a media standpoint, I don't feel like sometimes NFL buildings feel like it's a big topic until the national people are talking about it. And so while we've talked about it a lot, I think Doug's like, whatever, we can handle that. Like, it's not that they know we've been talking about it, but I think they are just like, it's fine. We can handle it over here. If everybody's going to start talking about it on First Take and other places like that, that's where it starts to be like louder in their ears. That's what's on in their buildings, those national shows. They should have our show on, but it's on is the national shows. So that's what I'm talking about. Is it like the play calling thing in Jacksonville where to be honest with you, the play calling, Austin, has not been an issue at all with the players. Like, it's not been a question that's even really been presented to the players very often, other than, I think, Trevor on a couple of occasions, because it's really a Doug thing. It's a Doug in the media kind of thing, right? It's like, okay, are you going to tell us or what? So it has not actually, unless they go put a stinker out there on Tuesday, then it becomes a player thing as well. Like, hey, should they make a change, or is Doug doing this right? Then I think you can go to the players and ask about it. So I guess that's the context I'm asking this question. Is this hey, Ryan Nielsen's probably going to address it on Thursday because Doug brought it up and somebody's going to ask about it? Or is this something that, like, in the locker room this afternoon, people are asking, hey, do you take offense to that? I mean, that was a pretty good effort, and your coach said you got to coach that. But see, I don't know if it's a player thing, Austin. Like, I don't even know if I would ask you if you were playing about this question, because he said it was all about coaching. So it might just be a Ryan Nielsen question tomorrow, and that's it.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing about it too, Brent. Whether it's going to be a Ryan Nielsen question, a player's question, you have a feeling you get kind of the same answer. And it's like, yeah, we have to do a little better here. Like, the last thing, like, True. If you ask Ryan Nielsen, what'd you think of Doug Peterson's comments? I think Ryan Nielsen's going to come out and say, well, it really hurt my feelings, and I wish you would have consulted me a little bit first. Like, I don't think Ryan Nielsen is cut from that cloth. I think Ryan Nielsen, will call it criticism, call it critiques, but he'll take that and he'll be like, yeah, I think we can do a better job here and move on, because he understands the inner workings of a locker room and a coach's room. So, like, I don't expect it being a big deal, just because I think when Ryan Nielsen gets asked, which he should be asked, I think any media, regardless of state, city, would ask him the question. I think he's going to brush it off and say we're on to Cleveland. And I think any other player, too, isn't going to dwell on that. We're always taught to play the next play, focus on the next team. I do think it's going to be an after story by the time it hits Thursday, but I still think that there is a little conversation in the locker room right when right when Doug Peterson had those comments. Now, this is the beauty of the NFL, Brent. It's a week-by-week basis. So maybe you come out against Cleveland, whose offense right now seems to be a little, struggling with Deshaun Watson, and he's going through a lot right now, more allegations. So I'm sure a lot more stress on his plate. Say you go against Cleveland Browns at home, a game you're probably supposed to win, and you have a good showing, then it's an afterthought. Then we don't even talk about it anymore for the entire year, I feel like.
Yeah, on to Buffalo.
They're on to Buffalo, exactly. But if this, if it's more of the same, and maybe they have a rough go around with the Cleveland Browns, which I can't foresee happening, but say this happens, and maybe the defense is porous. Well, then what does Doug Peterson say after that? So it's just, to me, it's not a big deal. Like I always say, Brent, it's not a big deal until it's a big deal. And while right now, going into week 2, we can sit here and say, okay, round to Cleveland, it's all good. I'm not going to forget of a little bit of a snowball that started because of a Doug Peterson comment about Ryan Nielsen. Now, it's just a pebble. It's a small ice chunk, let's just say. But when you have those things, Brent, you leave those open to keep rolling, to keep festering, to keep growing and become a bigger problem. So I'm just going to table it and be like, all right, we'll see what happens this week, but I'm not going to forget that it's there.
Yeah, that's fair, and I don't know if any of us will. I think there's a little bit of a danger zone this week in all of this kind of conversation, and maybe this makes the comments and the underbelly of it all worse. And the fact is this: the Browns, I mean, coming off week 1, it's hard to say they're good, right? They have a good roster overall, but it's hard to say they're good. They're obviously there's things going on with their offense, from an offensive line, but to Deshaun Watson. But their defense, Austin, is very good. Like, it's legitimately good. It was the number 1 passing defense in the National Football League a year ago. They are front to back legitimate, with maybe the best defensive player in the NFL, quite frankly, in Myles Garrett. So what's scary about this is that, this is one of those games where you might have to win 20-16 because you might be playing the number 1 defense in the National Football League. But if you do that on the heels of 17 points, Now it feels like your offense still stinks and this thing's bubbling and everything else. But our expectations maybe in this game shouldn't be to score 30 points. Our expectations against Miami was score 27 to 30 points, but maybe not against the Cleveland Browns. And so, and listen, if you followed me at all in town, you know I don't try to get too dramatic like this, and from a negative standpoint especially. More sunshine and rainbows here even on these rainy days. But I feel right now on Wednesday going into this Browns week that this week is so big from a narrative standpoint and everything you just said, Austin. I think they need to get a win. And even if they get a win, we might still not be, clapping about their offense. But if they lose, I feel like this could go to like 8 or 9 on the panic scale in a hurry in Jacksonville, which has never been my MO. Like, I've never thought, like, it's a long season. Doug's even shown after 1-2, they came out of it last year. After 3-7, they came out of it the year prior. He has shown the ability to do that with his football team. But based on expectation, Shad comments, the offseason, the collapse of last year, the collapse of Sunday, the comments of Monday, the offense kind of just staying too stagnant over the last year and a half and change, I think this could hit a level of uh-oh in a hurry in Jacksonville, really more than even some of those bad teams I've covered in Jacksonville.
No, you aren't wrong, Brent, because I think when we broke down the first 4 games, and it's kind of a little bit of a murderer's row in terms of talented NFL teams, at least on paper, when we gave our predictions. And I think we all agreed that, out of the Dolphins, out of the Browns, out of the Bills, out of the Texans for those first 4, the Browns game has to be the game that you at least have to win. Now if you go 2-2, fantastic. I think fans would be happy with that. But you got to beat the Browns here. And I'm going to be honest, it's just 1 week, right? We talk about the first week of football is not necessarily the team that you think they are, right? Like, don't let the Bengals fool you. They're still a good team. Don't let the Patriots fool you. I think they still have a ways to go, right? So, like, let's not put all our eggs in the week 1 basket. But when you see the Cleveland Browns and how they operate, they do have a quarterback problem right now. And this just wasn't, this wasn't in one game this year. This stemmed from last year as well. And once a quarterback shows you who he truly is, it's kind of hard to get those preconceived notions out of your head. Talking to you, Daniel Jones. Brent, sorry, but talking to you, Daniel Jones. Talking to you, Deshaun Watson.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a team now with the Cleveland Browns, at least, on defense. Yeah, they have some great players on paper. On offense, it's going to be running the football. They don't have Nick Chubb. It's going to be the Jerome Ford show, and he did okay in his first game against the Cowboys. Now, keep in mind, the Cowboys' defense was just all over the place. But I see Micah Parsons have a big day. I see their pass rushing having a big day. And I look at Jacksonville and say, well, why can't Jacksonville do that? Why can't Jacksonville do that at home? So I think this is a tailor-made matchup for the Jaguars to win. Because if they stop the run, they force Deshaun into passing and bad decisions, I think they can make plays. Now, Tyson Campbell's out, right? So that's going to be a big thing going forward. Who's going to step up for him? And granted, like, every team's going to have injuries, right? Every team's got to replace their players. Now, I wish it wasn't the star cornerback that just got paid that we have to replace. I wish it was a different position, but here we are. But long story short, Brent, the Jaguars should win this game on Sunday.
Yeah, listen, I think this is set up for the Jaguars to win, but it's also set up for disaster if they don't. And it has a little bit of like that Houston Texans game feel to it last year, where it's like coming into it, you're like, I mean, they were 9.5-point favorites. Now they are not that much of a favorite over the Browns. Like, there's not looking ahead and all that. And Houston stinks. Houston had lost 2 games, I think it was, going into that game last year, if I've got the time frame correct, and then they come in and beat Jacksonville and beat them like 37-17. Remember, it wasn't even that close because of all the special teams blunders. So we know this can happen. We know anything can happen. They lost to Tennessee at the end of last year. The Jags beating Indianapolis a couple of years ago at the end of 21. I mean, we're not dumb enough to just pencil it in as a win, especially of all places in Jacksonville over the years. But It's just set the table for a W, but it's also set the table for, Watson, all of a sudden he got right against the Jags, or, the offensive line, well, they figured out against the Jags, or, hey, Jags still can't win at home, because remember, the Jags didn't win at home last year, and that's the reason they missed the playoffs, quite frankly, is they could not win enough games at home. So I don't play that very often in here. I have not. I'm more... Listen, you go, first of all, the NFL, anything can happen. I get it. Even if they were to be 1-3 after the first 4, I probably wouldn't panic because of the next 3-game stretch. But it's not what you want to do. Not with the hype, not with the team you have, not with the comments and the underbelly stories that we have. I just, again, I go to that word toxicity now. And Robert says, lost 6 out of 7. You don't want to make it 7 out of 8. You don't want to make it 7 out of 8. In the way that it would look and feel on Sunday night into Monday, Jags go win this game. Like that it's a big, big game to get this thing on track and do all the things that Austen said earlier. Like, hey, okay, on to Buffalo now. Now you go win 1 out of the next 2, and you feel better about yourself going in that month of October. So it's a massive game early, which all of them are. All of them can do this. All of them change the storylines. It's the world we live in. It's a great reality show. It's what makes it fun for all of us to go back and forth on it. It's what makes it high pressure for those guys in a building, quite frankly, to go out and get it done. But there's a lot on this one now, and the Jags need their leaders to step up and make plays, Austen.
But yeah, absolutely. Two things. First of all, because obviously our slogan, on the Brent Austen show, the entire offseason, it's just been, it just feels different. It just feels different, right? Well, you have an opportunity now to make this feel different, because the way the script has been written in the past, this is supposed to be a game that you win. Cleveland comes in here, the offense is stagnant, the Jaguars can't score, there's some blunders, and the Browns squeak by with the win. We've seen this story a lot, it seems like. As people who cover the Jaguars. I think Jaguars fans can attest to this. So this is the opportunity to be like, okay, is it going to be more of the same? And it's just going to be, it's always the Jaguars where you're supposed to win this game. The team comes in here and somehow you find a way to lose it. Or do you turn everything around? Your offense clicks, your defense plays well, and you get a great team win against a team that you're probably supposed to beat. That's why I think it's going to be an important game. I thought Robert brought up a great point here. Lost 6 of the 7 last. Lost 6 out of the last 7. This team needs to learn how to win again. Yeah, I agree. But let me ask you this, Brent. And I'm not trying to be a smart ass here. I'm telling the truth. Does this team know how to lose properly? And when I say that, when you lose, obviously if you go on a losing streak, then maybe you make adjustments, right? Maybe things at practice, maybe teaching the philosophies differently, getting through to your players. There's a laundry list of things that you can do to, turn things around a little bit. We've seen a snowball, and it hasn't really stopped since last season. Is this team, do you think, learning from its losses, or is it just it's stuck, it's stagnant, and they just need a feel right win against the team that they're supposed to beat?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I understand it. And lose. Do you know how to lose in? There's different ways, right? Like the 2017 team that lost in 2018 didn't know how to lose, right? Because it just snowballed into 9 straight losses. But a lot of that was personality driven, and I would say ego and kind of me. This team doesn't have that. Now, does it have to learn to make a clutch play? Yeah. But
I'm going to make an argument here and say Doug Peterson, Connell's defensive coordinator, isn't showing that you know how to lose right.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't know the answer. I think this is where I do separate the 2 years, Austen. I think we have to, and I understand there's enough of people, and there's going to be a lot of questions about last year. The players hate, by the way, this, like last year, because they're odd. I mean, they have a 24-hour rule. When we get in there Wednesday, today, they're done with Sunday's game. You know it. You lived it. And that's a weird, we don't, but they do. And they're off that game. They really are. They genuinely are. So they're really off last year. But they do get a lot of questions from the media about last year. How does it compare and everything else? And now as you stack this streak, you're going to get that, much like you could play off the end of 22 in a winning way in the first part of 23 when you had won 15 out of 20 games or whatever it was. So I'm not saying it's unfair. I'm just saying it's a differentiator for them internally. I think there's a little bit of a barrier there. And this is where I would side with the players in the organization on, hey, we brought Armstead, Darby, Duvernay, Davis, Morse in here to not go 1-5 down the stretch. So let's give them the benefit of the doubt for now and say, hey, those guys in that locker room, along with the core group of leaders that experienced that last year, are going to bow up and have a good response to getting punched in the gut on Sunday and bounce back. That, again, it feels different, Austin. It's not only should it feel different, it better be different. That's what they spent the entire offseason trying to fix, is to not allow the losing streak from last year to continue and a new losing streak to start here in 2024.
Yeah, it's just, it's weird though, Brent, and I get what you're saying here. You're on to the next one, and I agree with you. That's the way as football players we're always programmed. You play the next play. But we've also heard Doug Peterson talk a lot about how, that Titans game, he still thinks about it, right? It almost seems like that Titans game still haunts him a little bit. And maybe he has used that as a little bit of extra motivation to add a chip on this team's shoulder, because we've talked about it a bunch on this show. The Houston Texans right now are the toast of the AFC South, and the Jaguars are almost a little bit of an underdog, which I like the Jaguars in that underdog role. But how much of that underdog role is now cemented on last season of trying to get that chip on your shoulder, and how much of it has to be, all right, we got to focus on the now. We can't worry about what happened in Tennessee. That was last year. Like, I wonder what that balance is, because just from, Doug Peterson's press conferences in the offseason, he did share that was a big talking point. As from his coaching, is just being like, we can't have that again. That Tennessee game hurt us. So I wonder how much is focused on the past just to get that chip on your shoulder, and how much is actually in that locker room is focused on the present of getting ready for the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, I think it's fair. That's a fair point. YB400 says, we know how to lose real good. We have to have that killer instinct. And that's the edge, right? That's the fine line of the NFL. If Etienne, did Etienne fumble because he doesn't have a killer instinct? I don't think so. I think he fumbled because it was just an inopportune time to fumble, and sports suck sometimes. That's just the way it goes. But we don't ask that question at all if he gets in the end zone yard and a half, half a second later, and not fumbles. That's the edge you live on in the NFL. And I'm not making an excuse for him or them or anybody. I'm just saying that's the reality of it. Like it or not, that's why this business that they're in is unbelievably great and unbelievably disappointing all at the same time. And that's why we're all locked into it, I think, because of almost like that question alone. It changes the entire narrative based on a yard and a half of holding on to the football. And by the way, everybody down in Miami talking about think about the storylines in Miami this week. If the Jaguars go in there, and what I think would have happened is they win 30-13 or 30-10. Honestly, I think the game was over. So what are the storylines down there? What are the Tua fans thinking down there after that first half? What are they thinking about Tyreek Hill in that whole situation? And I know that's not, the way this has turned out, it's not a Tyreek Hill story, but it might be totally different about the way they feel about it. But that's the razor's edge of the NFL, quite frankly. And that's what we're living on right here in Jacksonville. Right now, we lived on that for the last 6 weeks last year. I said it yesterday. There are 4 games in that stretch. They won 1. They should have won 3 others, quite frankly. Plays were there to be made, and they should have won those games, and they didn't. So pretty wild.
Welcome back to the Brent and Austen Show, streaming on the Action Sports Jax 24/7 network.
Well, that's the scene down at Jags headquarters. Little Vita de Luis Tequila. They'll be out there, by the way, at the Dream 18 golf tournament coming up on Monday. So you can get a little tequila at the Dream 18 at Southampton on Monday. But this morning, there's a look at some of the new items that will be available during the home opener. We'll have more details coming out, but Liv is there, and some of the food and beverage, and they got hot dogs, and they got pretzels. So it's a big pretzel, so I like it. Everybody likes a pretzel. Maybe the most popular item added to a menu in recent years is like the big pretzel as an appetizer. And people love them. So you'll have them at Jags games as well. I don't know. That's what I got to figure out, as if this is just in the club area or if this is around the stadium. So I'll get the details on that. But looking good here on a Wednesday morning. Live the foodie down there at Everbank Stadium today. Brent Martineau along with Austen Lane in Las Vegas. Nick in the daytime has joined us now. He's subbed out. Like we're rotating people in and out here. As Kim had to go run and do something. She'll be back, is what we understand. One other thing I wanted to ask you about, you brought it up a couple of times, we really haven't talked about it. You seem a little bit more bothered by it than maybe I do. And that is the Christian Kirk thing. I did think, huge Kirk guy, by the way, and we'll have him and Brian Thomas on Jaguars All Access tomorrow at String Sports Brewery in Springfield. Brian Thomas and Christian Kirk will be out there. And listen, if that doesn't tell you everything about Christian Kirk, like he doesn't have to go this week coming off a pretty rough game. And he's like, yeah, I'm good. You know, he's cool. He's cool with facing the music. If you listen to the post game, when I asked him about it, he owned it like right away. But it obviously bothers him as a player, and you don't like it as a player. And he must have been scrolling through, man, because I don't even think the tweet, he must have just found it. I don't know how these guys find their stuff, if they're looking it up or if it just kind of lands on their page or whatever. But somebody commented like, yeah, maybe you should play Parker Washington more, blah, 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 blah. And then he commented on top of that, like, keep the same energy up. It was a little bit reminiscent of Trevor from last year at times. It was Kirk has done this in the past, more after the fact of 2022, when people were really clamoring about the contract that he signed. And he said something similar, I want to say, of keep the energy up. And you said he deleted the tweet. I didn't even know that he deleted this tweet. But, I mean, is it a big deal? Yeah. Is it a big deal? Is it just a little frustration? This guy's the ultimate pro, man. Like, I don't worry about him at all bouncing back. But it seemed to bother you a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it always kind of bothers me a little bit, Brent. And listen, like, if this was a rookie, it's one thing, right? But we're talking about Christian Kirk here, who's obviously a seasoned veteran. He knows how to go about his business. He knows what it is to be professional, right? So far be it for me to give him any advice of how to handle himself on the field or off the field. But, I've been pretty consistent in this thought, and I said it a lot when Trevor Lawrence was kind of tweeting and looking at some of the replies of people being very critical of him. You just, to me, it's just energy that you don't have to waste. Okay, because trust me, I've had my fair share of criticism, my fair share of threats in my DMs and everything. And this is more from fighting than it was playing for the Jaguars, obviously. But you start to learn that it just doesn't matter. Like, to me, it's distractions that you don't need to concern yourself with, right? And I don't know, like, if he was name searching himself. I don't know if somebody else saw it and brought it to his attention. Whatever the case may be. But, a fan going, get Parker Washington in there. And then, like, having, I guess, just like this the self-belief that you need to respond to that comment, being a professional football player, it's baffling to me, Brent. And it'd be, once again, it's one thing if it's like a rookie that's doing this. All right, I get it. You still have a lot to learn, young one. But like, this is Christian Kirk. This is a veteran. This is a guy who knows how to do things the right way. And I just question whether, do you gain anything at all from responding back to fans that want to see Parker Washington? And my answer is no, you don't. So then why are you doing it?
Yeah, and I don't think you're wrong there. And I think that's probably why he took it down. And listen, it's going to come. He knew it was coming. I mean, he knew the criticism was coming. He said it to me right after the game. So, I mean, he can't be surprised by it. And it's just the way it is. But that would probably hurt a lot because, I mean, like we've said it. I mean, he catches even one of those passes, we think the outcome could be different on top of the ETN stuff. And listen, I'll tell you this about Kirk, and maybe this is just blind faith and maybe even a sense of bias because I am a big fan of him. And he's one of the great – I don't think he gets talked about enough in that locker room. Like we talk about guys like Calais over the years and Puz. He's of that ilk. He really is in terms of pros. He's so good. And So you really kind of root for guys like that, man, as you know, whether you're a player or even outside the building. And I still think he's going to have a big year. Like I don't think this is going to derail him. I think this is he's dropped passes in the past. I mean, oddly enough, this is a group of receivers, even going back to Zay Jones, that has had its share of drops, even when they're having career years and big games. So they seem to move on okay. I don't like the drops. I don't think anybody should like the drops, but they have happened in the past and still had career years. I'm still very confident, and I know Trevor Lawrence is super confident, number 13.
Yeah, and you have to be, right? Because that's still Trevor's go-to guy. It's just, if I guess the way I look at it, Brent, is if you have, and this was Trevor last year as well, like if you have really your leaders and your pillars, your foundation guys doing this, then like what are the guys that aren't that like capable of? I guess like to me. When you're a captain, when you're the quarterback, when you're the experienced veteran, it's almost sometimes an unfair double standard just because, you have to kind of set the culture and you kind of have to show what it's like to be a professional. And maybe these days of clap backing on social media to random strangers who feel a certain type of way, maybe that is the status quo now. And maybe I'm just kind of old and this is more of a get off my lawn type of rant here than it is, getting anything out of this. But I just feel like you're sending a message of, well, this guy's talking smack. Let me respond to it. Like it doesn't matter, man. All that matters is what you do on the field, and everything else is really secondary. So I hope it's not a trend going forward. I hope it's more of just like, hey, let's focus our energy on the field and getting better, as opposed to like clapping back at Jake's Twitter.
Yeah, and here's the other one. And there's getting some comments. About ETN, and I just saw Marcel Robinson's dad at Doug Peterson. He tweeted about ETN. He's self-motivated. We spoke during and after the game. I just reassured him that we're going to continue to give him the football. I think that's the best thing. Get him back on the horse. That's Doug talking about Travis Etienne. And he's of the same. I'm not going to talk out of both sides of my mouth here. He fumbled for the first time in like 20-something games. All right? It was a good play. I think he's a good player. So there's two things. One, he's going to get the football. I think he's still their number one back, but there is conversation coming off week one. And I think you talk about overreaction Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, overreaction on week one. I mean, listen, great job by Tank Bigsby. That was awesome to see. But can we slow things down on taking over the number one running back spot off one game? I mean, one game? I mean, can we have a little bit of like reality check here? I mean, Etienne's been doing it for 2 years behind an offensive line that actually has struggled at times in those 2 years, and he's still got 1,500-plus yards from scrimmage each year. So I'm not off the ETN train either, and I don't think we should be, Austin. I don't think we should take a good performance from Tank Bigsby and shove him to the top of the line just because.
Yeah, well, and it's funny because I'm not sure if you've really seen the national narrative in the fantasy football world. But I was listening to Field Yates a little bit, and they were talking about how, will Tank Bigsby kind of eat into some of Travis Etienne's share? And they're all saying how, well, when Travis Etienne fumbled, that was kind of the last time that we saw him, and then it was the Tank Bigsby show, and he came in and did his thing. It's like, well, you obviously didn't watch the game at all, because that's not what happened. Like, Travis Etienne fumbled, and then he went right back in there again.
Yes.
So there wasn't like, and I think every team does this differently. I think if you talk about a Bill Belichick-led team and Travis Etienne would have done that, we may not have seen Travis Etienne the rest of the year, right? Like I think that's more of Bill Belichick's MO. We saw Travis Etienne the next series. So to all the pundits out there on the national level who say like, whoa, he fumbled, so expect Tank Bigsby to get back in, like, no, that's not true at all, because they had no problem going back to Travis Etienne right after he fumbled. Listen, like I've been very adamant about this, Brent. Like I still think Travis Etienne's your guy until proven, wrong. Like I understand it was a huge mistake. That mistake helped cost you the game, but you still have to roll with the guy that, for the most part has been consistent for how many years now, has been dependable for how many years, who has been explosive for how many years. Now, if you want to couple that, like I've wanted you to do for, since the start of the season, and get a big dose of Tank Bigsby in there as well, fantasy football owners might be pissed off about it, but I'm not going to be pissed off about it, right? Because it's about winning games, and I think that's the best way to win games. So, I think going forward, it's going to be more of the same. Like, I don't think we saw the emergence of Tank Bigsby because of the Travis Etienne fumble. I think that was always the plan. And I think anybody that was covering this team during training camp or listened to Doug Peterson's comments could see that. I guess my biggest question to you, Brent, is when that fumble happened, and obviously it drastically changed the game. It was a 14-point swing. Do you think that he should have been benched a little bit? Do you think that he should have had time to kind of think about what he did, or do you think it was better just to kind of get him right back in there and say, hey, man, we're still depending on you. Go out there and get it?
Yeah, I don't think so at all. I think they handled it the perfect way. I don't like the other way. Me, man, I like talking about the psychology of sports. And I'll also say this. I think there's built-up equity for a guy like Etienne and what he's done. I don't think there was built-up equity necessarily for Tank Bigsby. I think you can look in a guy's eyes sometimes and be like, ooh, this guy's not feeling good after that, and he might need to shake this off on the sideline. I don't think that's it with Etienne. I mean, again, the first fumble in like 20-something games for Travis Etienne. So this is no different than Trevor throwing an interception. You don't go bench him. So I just don't think I don't like that. I like the way the Jags handle it. I actually think they learned a little bit from the way they dealt with Bigsby last year in these kind of situations. They kind of lost confidence in him. He lost confidence in himself. They went back to him late at the end of the year, but by then it was too late to help him develop. So yeah, I totally agree with the way they did it. In fact, I like the way they did it in getting him the football first. The first play went to him. Now, not with a handoff, if I remember correctly, but it was a little screen play, and I don't know if it went for like 7-8 yards or something like that, but they got him involved right after. Got him back on the horse, as Doug said. To me, that's the way to go anyway, but I actually think that's what I like about Doug, because he's been there before, Austin, and he knows kind of this is the way a player should respond. Go give him the ball again. Go feed his confidence again. That was a one-time thing, almost like I say about golf. If you talk to professional golfers and elite golfers, they'll be like, that wasn't my fault. The crowd, the camera clicked, the grass wasn't right, the wind was blowing, my caddy's fault. That's why they have a caddy, so they can blame somebody else, in my opinion. And so they just don't let it invade their psyche of confidence. And I think there was so little time that happened by the time he got back on the field, if you think about this, right? Because, boom, fumble. Miami's ball, touchdown, back on the field. I mean, it was probably real time within 5, 6, 7 minutes. And so, yeah, give it right back to him. I like the way they did that. And I'm not sure you do that with every player, but it's much like I would target Christian Kirk 7 times in this football game coming up, because I think he's burdened to get the football and he'll catch them all.
Yeah, I mean, like, listen, we've seen this kind of before a little bit with other NFL teams. Like, anytime you have a receiver who has an off game, who doesn't get the targets, who has big drops, usually the course correction is for him to have that big game. And I do agree with you, Brent. Like, I think benching a running back, like, every case is different. I think if you have a young guy, maybe who's like a first-year guy, this is Travis Etienne's rookie year, maybe you pull him aside a little bit and say, hey, we can't do that here. But obviously he knows that he messed up. Everyone knows that he messed up. But I thought it showed a lot in saying, hey, man, all right, that's a mistake. We're over it. Let's go out there and make another play. And, and I understand, I think this fan base now, and I think the national pundits, they're kind of infatuated with Tank Bigsby a little bit and the emergence of him. But make no mistake about it. Like, if you want this team to go to the playoffs and do what we think they can do, Travis Etienne is going to be a big part of that if they want to be successful. So, I'm not mad at not benching him. I'm not mad at him going back out there right away and giving him more reps, just because you're gonna have to rely on him. Like, yeah, he may have helped cost you a game against Miami, but if you're talking about meaningful games in December, in January, it's gonna be because of Travis Etienne as well.
Yeah, don't forget, folks, all right? At times, he has been one of the most underrated players over the last couple of years in the National Football League. At times and stretches of the last 2 seasons, he has been the best running back in a 4 to 5 week stretch in the National Football League. So, like, he's got that kind of potential in him to really go on a run and especially, you don't want to lose that kind of confidence. I will say this, and I've seen a couple of chats. I think their pass game, I want to see their pass game open some more stuff up for ETN in the pass game and underneath. I think you can go the opposite way sometimes because there's a lot of tension on the Brian Thomases and everything else. I don't think we saw that the other day. I think we saw that in preseason where they were going to get down the field. Now, they were number one percentage in explosive plays, so they did get down the field, but I didn't see the stuff underneath opening up for ETN the way I thought it might. Now, again, worth noting in the football game is they got 50 plays, and that's it. The thing we didn't talk about this week enough is how bad they were on third downs at 2 for 10. They only got 50 plays in the game. Honestly, you're not going to win a lot of football games if you have 50 plays in the game. I just saw these EPA numbers on Trevor Lawrence, Austin. He was 4th in the NFL on some metric or whatever. I mean, 4th in the NFL. He was the 4th best quarterback in all these whatever metrics, however weight you want to put on him. And they lost the football game. Like, it's just crazy to see some of the things that came out of that game, and the Jags were on the losing end, and now some of the narratives that are here. One last thing on the running back spot. Are you surprised at all we never see Bigsby and ETN on the field at the same time?
Yet. I mean, that is still one game. You could put a package in there for both of them. Yeah, I mean, we call him Tank Bigsby, but he's not really built like a fullback. So, I mean, you have to wonder, in what capacity would it look like? I mean, I feel like Travis Etienne's a guy, too, that you can kind of put in the slot a little bit or, kind of move around, kind of like a Debo, if you will.
Yeah.
So, I wouldn't be surprised if we do see something like that down the line. But, I mean, for the first game of the season, I wasn't too surprised because, Brent, we've seen a lot of things, right? We've seen Evan Ingram at fullback a little bit. We've seen Brenton Strange as an H-back. So, I think there's a lot of wrinkles still out there that have been untapped. And I think, as you progress towards the season, when teams start getting your tendencies down a little bit, that's when you kind of throw that change up and keep them guessing.
All right, I'm going to get way behind on the breaks again. So let's hit one here, even though it's top of the hour, and we'll come back. I have a lot of different things on my mind, but one of them that I want to get to is actually involves ETN. And just think about this over the next few minutes, and then we'll get to it. Trevor Lawrence, ETN, Trayvon Walker, Devin Lloyd, Brian Thomas Jr. Take those 5 guys coming off what you know, how you feel about them, and what we saw on Sunday. So, you have to do a little bit of gymnastics here to get maybe where I'm going. But these are first-round picks of the last, now 4 years? 4 years. 4 years. And, heck, you could put Anton in here, quite frankly. But take those now 6 guys over the last 4 years. Have the Jags really hit on the first rounders? How do you feel about those first rounders? Because if you feel good, doesn't that say a lot about how you should feel about the football team? We'll talk about it when we come back. Brent Austen Show, Action Sports Jax 24/7 Network. There's the lineup, 6 to 10, Miller and Moulton here each morning, 4 to 6, Young and Norvell Show in the afternoon. And by the way, we'll have our picks on Friday. We're competing against the other shows, including Casey's show on Saturday mornings, where he talks college football and all the betting odds for the weekend. And we'll see who can come out on top. We had a good week. We were 5-1 with our picks. A new set of picks roll out later this week. All right, let's get back to some football talk. I said this before the break, and now I've given you plenty of time to think about it, folks. But if I'm looking at the obviously they pay Trevor Lawrence, and you come off that game where hey, Trevor played pretty well in that first half, just didn't have a chance in the second. You take ETN overall, and I know people are going to look at the fumble, but I think ETN, if you take the last couple of years, and then it's been good. Trayvon Walker is really coming on. And I'm going to show you some evidence of that in just a minute. But he's coming on. Devin Lloyd, nice positive sign the other day. It's a small sample, so it kind of works the opposite of the way my ETN is building. But maybe there's something to grab onto there with Devin Lloyd. And then you add in what Brian Thomas Jr., which by many accounts had the best rookie debut of anybody in the National Football League, some would say. And then if you want to throw in Anton Harrison, who really had a rough game, maybe his worst game as a pro, but last year showed a lot of promise that this guy's going to be in it for a long time. I mean, if you take those 6 players, Austin, over the last 4 years picked in the first round, this was an organization, remember, that had a hell of a hard time landing first rounders. And if you really want to go back to do that, I know 2020 was a disaster. That's like the poster child for it, with 2 misses with Chason and Henderson. But even prior to that, they obviously got Josh Allen, and Josh is now extended. But I just want to take these 6 guys over the last 4 years. What does it mean? Like, is that more of a sign that you can find a lot of good in those 6 players, or you think there's a lot to grab onto? And to some degree, like, there's stuff to grab onto. Others, you're maybe hitting and hoping a little bit about where this organization is. And sooner or later, no matter what, you can have a bad loss in Miami, or you might not feel great right now, but that's going to rise to the top when you do that well with your first rounders and you hit on players like that.
No, I mean, that's what it's all about, Brent, right? Is that you have to hit on your first rounders. You have to get, the bang for the buck, if you will. And I think for the most part, they have. Now, yes, he had probably his best game of the season against Miami. The best game of the season, his first game, but the best game of his career against Miami. But, there's still a lot to see with Lloyd because, it has taken a little bit to get here. With Trevor, obviously you made him the franchise quarterback, more power to you. With Trayvon Walker, we're always going back and forth. Who's the better player, Aiden Hutchinson or Trayvon Walker? And they'll probably be tied together until the day that they both retire. Right. And you can throw Kayvon Thibodeau in there, but honestly, Brent, once again, I don't know because I watched that Lions Rams game and obviously Hutchinson was making a big difference as well. But I don't know who I'd rather have. I'm perfectly fine with having Trayvon Walker in Jacksonville. I don't think there's a drop-off between him and Aiden Hutchinson. I think they're both great players. I think they both make, they're difference makers for their teams. But I think Trayvon Walker fits Jacksonville nice. Wouldn't you agree? Would you rather have – and I get it. We can be a little biased, but, take off the teal-colored glasses quick. Would you rather have Hutchinson right now or Trayvon Walker?
Yeah. I've never thought, and I don't think it's teal colored. I've never thought, man, Jack should have taken Hutchinson, or man, I wish I had him. I really like Trayvon. I really like his skill set. I really see he's still ascending. I think Hutchinson is good, and no doubt. I don't think you could deny that. But I also think he might have he went 0 to 60 quick. You know what I'm saying? And I think we're just seeing a slower run to 60 for Trayvon Walker, but it's still going. He might get to 80. You know what I mean? I don't know where it ends for Trayvon Walker. I don't know if I see a TJ Watt 18 sack guy in Aiden Hutchinson, Austin. I'm not sure if he's that guy. I think he's a really good player, but I don't know if he's that guy. I can't tell you that Trayvon Walker isn't that guy yet. I don't know where the ceiling stops. Did we lose Austin? You might not have liked that.
He's there. I don't hear him anymore.
Huh. Might not have liked my commentary there. But we'll get Austin back on. Might just bump something. And but anyway, the bigger point for me, and I think that's a good argument, or not even an argument, but it's it's if you take year 1, 3.5 sacks versus Hutchinson, I think was around 10.5, something like that, or 9.5 it was. It was 9.5. And just the way he did it in the primetime games, see, that's where Hutchinson really has made a name for himself. What he's done in the primetime games, I think when the TV cameras are on him, man, he's been good. And that's not a bad thing. That is not a knock. I'm just saying at the right moments, really good. I think Herbert had a little bit of this going back, and so what you build is this almost equity and rapport with people. This guy's really good, And I think if you deep dive on Trayvon, he's a much quieter player in that regard. He doesn't have his face painted, right? He's not representing the hometown and the Michigan, Detroit thing. The Lions have actually been better anyway. He fits perfectly with the Campbell stuff. There's not that with Trayvon. But that doesn't mean he's not a good football player. And I think he's a really good football player. And I know Austin doesn't love the fact of moving him around, but the bottom line is he can play multiple positions on that front because he's that good of a football player. And he got off to a hell of a start with 2 more sacks. All right, we got you back, man. So sorry we missed you there for a second. Yeah, okay. But yeah, I think what I eventually said was I don't know where the ceiling is for Trayvon Walker. I think we're still figuring that part out. I'm not to tell you that I've seen the ceiling of Aiden Hutchinson, but I think we have a little bit more of an idea of where he's kind of settled in as a football player, which can be a very good end. I'm just not sure if there's still more in the tank for Trayvon that might be like elite kind of player.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was really adamant about this when we were kind of dissecting that draft class and who do you take? Do you take Thibodeau? Do you take Hutchinson? Or do you take Trayvon Walker at number one? Because you're in desperate need of an edge rusher. And, like, you know, my biggest thing was I think Hutchinson was the most NFL-ready player just because, you know, the pedigree, how it went at Michigan, his style, it reminded me a lot of, like, the Bosa brothers. And I think you're seeing a guy who came to the NFL right away who, you know, understood it and, you know, is still ascending, but like kind of got off to the head start just because of the pedigree. And then you had a guy like Trayvon Walker who, you know, was playing all these positions and was playing with a lot of great players at Georgia and wasn't really counted on to be the guy all the time, if you will. And that's the thing that we have to keep on remembering, you know, as fans here is like, yeah, the guy had double-digit sacks last year. Yes, the guy has 2 sacks right now. He's still learning how to play the position. Okay. Hutchinson, like, yeah, he shifted a little bit too from the 3-4 to a 4-3. So he had to learn some new things, but like he's pretty seasoned now at defensive end, at the edge. Trayvon Walker is still learning the position and he's learning it and playing at a very high level at the same time. So that's a rare commodity there. And then, you know, when it came down to Kayvon Thibodeau, I said this, I think he was the biggest boomer bust guy out of that group just because, you know, you see the athleticism, you see the get off, you see the bend, and it's like this guy can either be the next Von Miller or, you know, with the attitude, with the personality, he can fizzle out in a couple years. And I think he had a good year last year. He was very productive. I still think it remains to be seen, though, like, can he elevate himself out of this, you know, out of this group of 3 to be the top guy? I still think he has a ways to go to do that. So, yeah, I mean, go ahead and give me Trayvon Walker. Give me the guy who's still learning the position, but is also playing the position at a very, very high level.
Brent Martineau, Austin Lane out in Vegas. Kim's Corner here as well on a Whataburger Wednesday. Kim, can we throw up this that full screen? Were you able to get that? Hey, look at that. You got it. Didn't even like budge, Kim. You were just like, hey, I got this. Don't worry. Very calmly did that. So, hey, I don't know if you can see this, Austin, but so here's what I did.
Okay.
I took his first 20 games. I think I did the math right here, too, but you'll get the idea regardless. First 20 games, which goes to his rookie year in 22, where he got 3.5 sacks. And then really the first 5 games of last year, I think, which was through the Buffalo game, if I'm not mistaken, in London, which, by the way, started to come on a little bit in those London games. But that's where I put the separator. And then the last 13 games that he's had, he has 10 sacks in 13 games compared to the 5.5 he had in the first 20. He's got 7 tackles for losses in 13 versus 9 in 20. He's got more quarterback hits in 7 less games than he did in the opening 20. And the pressures are getting closer and closer as well. So, I mean, to me, this is an indicator that Walker is on the rise, and I think it's a little bit under the radar how good he was at the second half of last year. I've said this a couple times on the show. It's a bit reminiscent of Trevor Lawrence back end 2022, and then the way he started in 2023 when you took that whole compilation of time, bridging 2 seasons. I think we're getting a little bit of that right now from Trayvon Walker, and it's a hell of a sign, Austin.
We'll see what it looks like this season, Brent, right? Because you still have a guy who hasn't even reached his full potential yet. And, like, it really begs you to question, like, when he does reach that full potential, what will it look like? And I'm not trying to, like, over-embellish it and say, like, the guy's like the next J.J. Watt or anything. But you look at a guy like J.J. Watt or even, heck, Joshua Hines-Allen and, like, just, you know, how they can just take a game over. Or now you have, you know, TJ Watt doing the same thing in Pittsburgh. I mean, he had a great game if you watched the Steelers play on Sunday. You wonder what it's going to look like. And listen, and this has been my biggest gripe, I would say. I don't want to say gripe, but this is my biggest concern is, you know, you have a guy who's still learning the positions and everything, who was asked to do a lot of different things at Georgia. And now he's kind of cemented his role as an edge rusher here in Jacksonville. And you've seen both of his sacks came from the edge. You know, I was very leery of don't move him inside. Keep him on the outside, keep letting him grow a little bit, and then eventually when he gets that position down, then move him, right? Because it's almost like, there's two schools of thought here, Brent. Do you take a guy who is super athletic, who has all the capabilities, and you just move him around because he can handle it? Or do you take the guy and say, okay, we want you to learn this position first. Once you master this position, then we can move you around a little bit and you can learn other stuff. Because I'm not calling him J.J. Watt yet, but it reminds me a lot of J.J. Watt, who was more brought in as a 3 technique, and that's where he was until he showed this guy is special. So let's go ahead and move him around. Let's go ahead and set him up on matchups where he can win every single time. Oh, and by the way, let's put him at tight end as well, too, in goal line packages. Eventually it got to that point. I hope they do the same thing for Trayvon. I hope it's really, all right, you're playing edge right now, you're playing defensive end, master this, learn this, and then guess what? If we play a team that maybe has a guard or like a guard center combination that's very, open for getting dominated, play in and play out, then move him down there as well.
Yeah, some people will throw some metrics out. I think there was a comment in the chat actually that isn't he a better run stuffer? Yeah, I think he's very good against the run. And Trayvon I think he had the best win rate, whatever the hell that is. These metrics, we can make something. But the run win rate or something was 54%, I think I saw, and that was the best in the NFL. So, listen, I don't. We get carried away with a lot of these numbers, but I get what they mean. I don't know specifically. I mean, if you add enough of them up, the bottom line is it supports the point I'm making. He's playing good football, and he is a wrecker in the run game too. Like, there are a lot of people last year, and even when some of the numbers weren't there, this is last year before he probably got on this hot streak, they were like, that dude changes every play on the defensive front.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of attention he gets. And they have 2 guys. Josh got a lot of attention, it sounds like, from the Miami offense. And so, and now you add Eric Armstead in, and it was a cool moment. Yes, as I was watching back the Trayvon interview, Stewart got him in the locker room on Monday, and somebody asks Trayvon about Eric Armstead. And as they ask, there's this huge smile that gets on the face of Trayvon, who, by the way, is usually very low-key, subtle, stoic, if you will. And, I mean, he just this glowing smile. And then he delivers an answer. Man, I loved it. I can remember a play. How much Armstead is going to help Trayvon Walker.
Yeah.
Said it in the smile to me, Austin. So I think, one game sample, obviously Armstead coming back into it a little bit. He'll probably take a few more weeks to kind of get up to full speed. But if this goes the way they envision it, that front should be really good.
Yeah, and obviously if you're Eric Armstead, if you're Josh Hines Allen, if you're Trayvon Walker, you're all excited because you know what the task at hand is when you have more than one great edge rusher, when you have an interior push who's a guy who's really good as well, everybody eats, Brent. Those are fun defenses to play in. I remember playing, with the Detroit Lions and playing with Ndamukong Suh. That was fun to play with because you understood that this guy's getting all the attention. This guy, even if you double team him, you're not going to stop Ndamukong Suh. And that makes things so much easier on the edge. And when you look at, offensive coordinators trying to game plan now for this Jaguars defense and everything, and there's a lot of wrinkles and all this stuff, but the first thing I'm looking at is how do we stop Eric Armstead? How do we stop Josh Hines Allen? How do we stop Trayvon Walker? And okay, you can script things to stop maybe one edge rusher, like a TJ Watt, like a Bosa, but how do you stop all 3 of those guys? And there's not an answer because you simply cannot. So when you're a defensive line and you know that you have that at your disposal, those are fun defensive lines to play with.
Yeah, it's I would agree. Listen, Duval Jack says, I like Josh Hines Allen at the lighter playing weight. Looked a step slower last Sunday. And with all due respect, first of all, I don't know if he was a step slower. Secondly, I think we see what we want to see sometimes. I think their pass rush rate and stuff wasn't great. Miami's offensive line played pretty well in that game by all those metrics. So I think we assume that he was slower. I didn't necessarily feel that way or see that. But I'm not telling you it's not the case. I think we just need a bigger sample to see if that's the case. And Austin, if that is the case, that's on the Jags. I mean, obviously Ryan Nielsen had him add weight. This wasn't like, this is a guy that's gone from 250 something to 285. Not overnight.
Yeah.
But since he got drafted over these 5 years. So I'm not saying he's going to play bad because of that. I'm not going to, like, I didn't see what Duval Jags is saying. I don't know if you saw it, but I think we need more of a sample to see if that's going to be the case, because guess what? Trayvon Walker did the same thing, and we weren't saying he looked a step slow.
No, for sure, Brent. But to be fair, and like I do agree with you, we do need a bigger sample size to see if it was a mistake or not to add weight if you're Josh Hines Allen. But I will say this, everyone puts on weight differently, and everyone responds to weight differently. I mean, if you look at Trayvon Walker and how big that dude is, yeah, you feel like he can handle it. Not to say that Josh Hines Allen can't, but, you add 10, 15 pounds of muscle, some guys will feel quicker, some guys will feel stronger, and maybe some guys will feel a little more lackadaisical. I mean, when I had to put on 20 pounds or 25 pounds for Kansas City, when I played a 3-4 defensive end, yeah, I mean, I had a couple months to do it, so it wasn't done the best way. A lot of barbecue and a lot of barbecue sauce, but I didn't feel my best. I did feel a step slower, and so and that's the thing, and it's cliche, but it's the truth. Like, it's a game of steps, it's a game of inches, and it's literally a game of, a 0.2 get, like a 0.0 second get off can make the difference between getting a sack and becoming a touchdown. So yeah, I'm gonna need more of a sample size, but it's a good question. It's a good observation where we saw Trayvon Walker dominate against Miami, and Josh Hines Allen, now one of the highest paid edge rushers. I mean, he did his part too as well, but like, at what point are we going to start to see, kind of like that TJ Watt takeover, if you will, from Joshua Hines Allen?